back. Now, for the 13th time in 15 years, the world has become even more dangerous, and that's according to the Global Peace Index that measures peacefulness around the world. It puts the global economic impact of violence at $17.5 trillion US. This equal to nearly 13% of the world's GDP. Now, my colleague Melissa du Preez has pored over the report and came across some troubling findings, and she joins me now. Melissa, very warm good morning to you. What's the first thing that stood out for you?
I think the most shocking thing, we know South Africa is not the safest place to be, but what's really quite horrific was seeing how much we are losing in terms of the cost of violence, so through demonstrations or conflict, crime in the country. And it's been quite an eye-opener to see just how prevalent it's been and how we rate according to other countries in the index.
Right. So with that being said, then I suppose you can start by telling us more about the report itself, but also how it was put together.
Sure. So the index covers 163 countries, and that includes 99.7% of the world's population. So it's pretty thorough. It uses 23 indicators that assess perceived criminality in society, murder rates, violent demonstrations, and more.
With that being said, how does then South Africa perform, do you think?
Shockingly, to say the least. If you look at the graphic behind me, you'll see that we spent or lost $176 billion, this is US figures, in 2022 to violence, and that's according to the various indexes of the report. And compared to 2021, that's a difference of R1 trillion. Now, we crack the upper 10% in the cost of violence, but that's not the type of chart we want to top. Conversely, though, given the high crime rates, large amounts of violent demonstrations and perceived criminality in South Africa, perhaps unsurprisingly, we sit in the bottom 12% for safety and security.
Melissa, looking at this, it seems like it's not a safe place at all, right? There are also warnings of social unrest in the lead up to elections, even next year. Also, COSATU having its nationwide strike tomorrow. What has then the index found regarding the protests?
So you're right about the warnings. Business leaders predict a resurgence of the July 2021 unrest or worse within the next 12 months. And given the index's findings, it's quite easy to see where they're coming from. In our second slide, you'll see that 74% of countries have seen an increase in the number of violent demonstrations over the last 15 years. In fact, demonstrations and external conflicts have each increased by an average 53% since 2008.
Well, of course, we can see there, Melissa, looking at our African neighbours as well, we see even more shocking numbers, right? So just take us through them, please.
So a bit of a mixed bag on the continent, as you can see behind me. 8 African countries, including Sudan, Somalia, South Africa and Mali, appear in the top 20 countries with the highest economic cost of violence. Conflict-related deaths in Mali, for example, increased 154% in 2022, with violence against civilians rising 570%. The Central African Republic, meanwhile, incurred one of the largest economic costs of violence, equal to about 40% of its GDP. But it's not all bad news. Libya, Burundi and Cote d'Ivoire all showed improvements in peace. And of course, while there's always hope for a better showing next year, all indications are that we're unlikely to get it.
All right, thank you so much, Melissa du Preez, for the presentation.